Awesome, it's good to be here with you guys. My name is Denbow, I'm a developer, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what makes developers endear to a certain API. What is it that they're looking for, and what are the things you can think about when you're developing your own? So, a little bit about who I am. I'm a developer. I graduated from school a couple years ago, studied computer science, and now I'm independent. I'm working on my own applications. I just put one out a couple weeks ago called Pixicle, which lets you send adorable photos of your niece, like my niece Adelia. I used a couple APIs for that, so I used Sincerely and I used Aviary in order to build it. It was my first iOS experience, and I built it within 3 or 4 days, just because there were really good APIs that I was able to access, and I could just focus on being creative. So these are the things you might want to think about when you're putting your things together. So I have a couple other projects called Startup Threads and some others, and I think the main thing that might be useful is that I'm involved heavily in the New York community, development community, and I talk to a lot of developers. I hear from them, and they tell me the things that they're looking for. Like they go to a hackathon, and they're trying to figure out, which API would be cool to use, which things are interesting, and there's a lot of very specific things that they get hung up on, and I hope I can introduce some of those things to you. So, in a higher level, why does an API matter to your business? Just a couple of things that having a developer community can bring for you. The first thing is creativity. So developers are going to end up mashing up your API with a bunch of other APIs, other data, and doing things you never even imagined. So one of my friends used Twilio to create a website called fakegirlfriend.co. So it's a site where you can go and use this phone number, and you can call and text your fake girlfriend, and she'll call you back. The funny part about it is he had his wife record all these messages between them, so you're actually talking to this guy's wife. But it's pretty interesting. But those are things that Twilio would never have thought of on their own, but they put it out there, and now he's on the Today Show, and it's going everywhere. And it's actually a good marketing channel, because now people are hearing about his service, and they're wondering how he did it, and they find out about Twilio, right? So you also get access to new markets, and also evangelists. People are going to go and talk about what your API does. If they have a really good experience like that, they built something in a weekend, they're going to go and tell their friends, and maybe it'll end up being something useful for another application. All right, so a couple of companies that are a little bit bigger that have had success with APIs. Netflix, in January of this year, they had over 20 billion API calls a month. That number is probably even more right now, but it's actually very helpful for them to create new applications, do product development through developers creating new things outside of their sphere of ideas. And the biggest example is probably Twitter. They put this number out last year that 75% of their traffic was coming through API calls that developers were creating. So for them, they actually did most of their product development for things like retweets and all these other things that people wanted in clients through having developers work on that. So there's some issues with making sure you have the right incentives, and people who are developing on your API understand where your company stands and where you stand as a developer. But it's amazing to see that even Twitter had 3/4 of their calls through their API. So I wanted to go through a couple of high-level topics that you guys might want to think about. Maybe Bill O'Reilly won't understand it, but you guys will. The top 4, I think, are solving a developer pain, incentives, commitment, and reliability. So solving a developer pain is pretty much the core of what you want to think about. Are you helping developers build things faster and more efficiently than they would if they were going to build it on their own? So if it's going to take them a couple weeks to build a certain set of services, if you can be that service that comes in and within 10 minutes they're able to get something up and running and it's reliable and makes their life quicker, it's better for them, and they can actually move on to doing the more creative things that they really want to work on. So one example of this is an API that's one of my favorites. It's called face.com. It actually does facial recognition. So facial recognition is like a very computer science-y, heavy topic. And if I was to build something to do facial recognition, it would take me a long while. But face.com was able to put all this facial recognition software into a very simple REST JSON API. And I ended up using it for a project called Celebrity Twin, which lets you log in with your Facebook account, pulls in your pictures, analyzes them, and then tells you what celebrities you look like. It's very useful. So, of course, I had to test it out, and I ran it through with my picture. I don't know if you guys have any guesses who my celebrity twin is. Who? LL Cool J. As a hint, he's very handsome. GQ Man of the Year. Denzel Washington, 66% facial similarity. So it's proof that I'm actually good looking. So it's awesome. I love technology. So incentives are really important. The gentleman from HubSpot was talking about this earlier, and I think it's really key. It's like, are your business goals in line with your developers? Right? So are developers worried that you might end up stealing some of their product innovations and then using that for yourself? Or are you in line with them? Are you going to grow as they grow? If they're successful, does that make you successful? So these are some things I would think about. Commitment is also important. Some companies have an API as like an add-on to all the other things they're doing, or for some companies, it's the core of what they do. And can I count on you to maintain and support that API as it's needed? Right? So if a company or if a developer decides to use an API, they're putting some trust in you, and they're trying to say, you know what, we think you can do this better than we can, and there has to be a good relationship, some commitment, and specifically in regards to reliability, making sure that your API is always available. Right? So this is actually from TechCrunch. I went to make a comment on a TechCrunch post, and this is what I got from Facebook. It's like, sorry, something went wrong. Right? So this is the danger in using an API, and these are the things that a developer might be wary of if they're going to use your API. Right? Like, am I going to be sure that your API is always going to work? Because when a customer of that developer's app comes to it and something doesn't work, they're not going to blame the API provider. They're going to blame you for choosing that API provider, or they're just going to blame you in general, even if they don't know who provided it. Right? So you have to think about reliability and making sure if you're going to really be committed to it, that things are going to be up and be available at all times. So I wanted to talk about some more specific things and give you guys some examples of pretty good APIs that you might want to check out. I think simplicity is really important. Getting to Hello World, that 5-minute demo, something that's really simple, that when I go into a hackathon, I can see a presentation and I can say, okay, I can build something with that, and within 10 minutes, I'm ready to go. I think that's really important. And having resources and things that are predictable helps with that process. So a good example of that is Foursquare. So if you go to their API docs, you can see badges, check-ins, friends, and it's all in a very simple format. It's regular REST API. You have user/user ID/friends. These are things I'd probably guess if I was just programming. I'd use one resource and then say, okay, I probably would use /friends to get the friends, and it would actually work. So it makes development a little bit quicker when things are as you expect it. Standards are definitely really important. My friend Jordan Orelli says, for the love of God, support JSON. Just like some of the other speakers were talking about earlier, having standards makes it quicker and easier for people to get started. These are the things we rely on. And for me, I went to a hackathon in Vegas about a month ago, and I ended up using 4 or 5 different APIs because they're all REST APIs, and I have a certain system for doing that. And it made it very simple to get started. I didn't have to learn any real proprietary stuff. Documentation is probably the core of everything. If there's only one slide that you guys check out, it's probably the documentation slide. Things like having good example code that people can use, having an API Explorer where people can test out the API and try out and see what things can be done with your API, and supporting multiple languages. So a good example of the Explorer is Mashery. This is for Clout. It's something that even a non-technical person can go to, and they can test it out. They can put in a username, get the response. They can get the call that they're going to use if they're going to actually put this in their code. I don't know if you can read it, but this makes things pretty simple and easy to get started. Stripe is another company that's doing a really good job with their API. They're a payments API, which is like a huge pain point for developers. And they have really good code samples, sample code that's copyable, and they supplement all of that with live chat. So you can see, as soon as you log into Stripe, this is the first page you see. You're brought right to a page with a request that you can copy and you can use on your own. Right? So you don't have to search for your API key, go to the documentation about authentication. It's all right there, gets you started. Has a whole flow of 4 different things you can do, and it gets you started very quickly. And they also have really good example code. So they don't assume that people are using one specific language, but for every single example, they're going to make a Ruby version, a Python version, a PHP version, making sure that anybody that comes to the website doesn't get hindered by the type of language they're used to and comfortable with. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is support. I think support is really important, and you need to make sure that if you're going to create an API that you're available to support people as they're needed. Right? So the best example of this, if this works, is Twilio. So they made like a huge commitment to reaching out to the developer community. They're an SMS and telephony API. And what they were realizing was that most of the developers are actually building stuff on weekends. Right? So they're going to hackathons, or they're deciding, you know what, I have a job, but I want to work on something over the weekend. And they made sure that there was dedicated support from Twilio evangelists over the weekend. So evangelists actually sign up for weekends and cover and make sure that all questions that come up over the weekend are handled. That's like a strong commitment to customer service where some other companies might just go 9 to 5 during the week. But you have to understand exactly how people are going to be using it in order to support them in the right ways. Right? And they have full-time evangelists, so when you go to an event, you know that Twilio is there and they're the first ones in your mind. Right? Because you talk to somebody, you have like a personal connection to them, and that's also important in building a relationship. You want to actually be friends with these developers, understand what they need, and that can help you in your product development as well. So that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, you can tweet me or ask me later, so thank you.